Part 1 of the simple stormwater drainage network. We will be going over placing the land use areas, which will define like our pavement, our sodded roadway slopes, etc. That way we can utilize those later on for our drainage areas. We will talk about placing the nodes, which would be placing the inlets, manholes, stuff like that on our final terrain model that we have produced out here. Then we will go through and connect those with conduits or pipes between each one of those nodes. Then we will go over the placing of the catchments that will go into those inlets. And we can utilize those land use areas. That way we can compute a composite C value from those for how much water that is going into those inlets. So that's what we will be going over in this part 1 video. As you can see here, we have some reference files attached. And just to show you that, if I go to my references, I can either go here or here. I'll go to my references, and you will see that I have some files here attached, which would be my plan, my final terrain model, which basically encompasses the existing area that maybe survey got, along with the proposed terrain that is being developed for this project. And then I have some land use areas and some drainage areas that will be going into those inlets, and I'll explain those as we go through the actual video. First thing that I'm going to do is come in here and set my terrain model as the active terrain model, and that's just a common practice that we do. That way, if you're trying to utilize any of the civil products out here, it'll try to find that terrain model. I will go ahead and left click on it, get to my dynamic toolbar, and I'm going to go ahead and set that as my active terrain. So that is my active terrain model now. Also, that you can see here, for our terrain model, we have our triangles turned on. Well, to make things a lot clearer, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the triangles in that terrain model. So let me go ahead and select it, go to the properties of it, and right now, since I have it referenced in, it's looking at what it was set back in that reference file. But if I want to turn off those triangles, what I can do is come into my properties and go to my override symbology and turn that to yes. Now I can come in here and basically turn off and on what I want to see for that terrain model. So I will come in here and go to my triangles and turn that off. Now I just see the boundary that's around that terrain model. Now another thing that you may want to utilize for drainage purposes is if I go back to the terrain model, go to the properties of it, there is an option right here that says flow arrows. This allows me to see how the water is flowing through that terrain model. And that may be beneficial to figure out where your low points are, your high points are, see where water is flowing at certain spots. So if I come in here and I turn that on, you can see as I zoom in here, you can see the water is going this direction because it's going off the crown of that roadway. And then it hits this curb right here. And then of course you can kind of see some of the arrows, so you see that it's flowing down. And you can see this section right through here. So at least gives you an idea of how the water is flowing through your terrain model. Let me go ahead and go back to the properties and turn that back off. The first thing that I'm going to do is come in here and create my land use areas, which would be my areas for like my pavement or my roadway slopes, or if I had rocky area or if I had wooded area. I'm going to go ahead and create those land use areas. That way later on I can utilize my place catchment tool, utilize those land use areas that has a certain C value. Then whenever I place my catchments for each one of those inlets, it can utilize those land use areas to compute a C value for the roughness of that particular area. So let me go ahead and go to the drainage and utilities workflow, which it's already set to that, but if it's not, this is what you need to set it to, and then go to the layout ribbon. From there, there's going to be an option right here that says place land use areas. Now the first initial time you come in here and start to utilize some of the drainage tools, you're going to get this box right here that says this action will embed files for the drainage and utilities project in the design file. Do you want to proceed? Yes, we do want to do that. And you would only want to do this, of course, in a drainage file. You don't want to do this into like your corridors file, your civil geometry file, or some other various files with your project. You really want to do drainage in its own separate file or files, depending on the situation that you got. Because basically what it does is it takes a database and it copies all that data into the DGN file. And it's only really set up to utilize for drainage stuff. So once that's done, let me go ahead and go back to the place land use areas. You have some different methods that you can do. You got pick shape, pick points, or flood, and then your feature definition. You expand this out. You got two folders. You got rural and urban. On this one here, if we go to the rural, you're going to see a bunch of different land use areas that you can define. And this is just stuff that you would look in the engineering posse guide to see what area goes with what, depending on the situation that you have. So that's what's set up for that particular area right there. And then you have the urban, which if you're working in an urban area, it has some certain C values depending on what area that you're working with. So basically in this particular project, we just have two different areas that we're going to work with. One is streets and roofs, which will put a C value for that particular area. And then we have one for the sodded roadway slopes, which will be this one right here. Let me go ahead and set it to streets and roofs. And then what we're going to come in here and do the pick shape option. Because what we've done for time purposes is I went through here and already created shapes for the areas that I'm going to pick for those particular C values. So let me go ahead and go back to my references. And what I'm going to do is turn off my terrain. And I'm going to turn off my plan and also my drainage areas. And then my current DGN file, which is the 3D option of it. And what you'll see now is just those areas right through here. So the first thing that I will do is come in here and select my layout method, which is the pick shape. Then on my dynamic toolbar, it says pick the shape, which is going to be this shape here, which is going to be the pavement area. And what it's going to do is create a land use area that drainage can utilize down the road. So I create one for that, and then what I'm going to do is come down through here and pick these other four shapes, which is the sodded roadway slopes. And of course that is a different type of area. So let me go ahead and go back to here, and I'm going to change it to the sodded roadway slopes. Then basically just follow the prompts again. I'll select my method, I'll select my shape, and it creates it. And I'll do the same thing to these other three right here. And then once I'm finished, then I can go ahead and right click the close out of the tool. Now if I go back to my references, and I'll click on it from right here, now I can come in here and turn off that reference file for the land use areas, and now you'll see those shapes that are out there. And those are land use areas that drainage can utilize down the road if you wish to utilize that. And I'll explain that a little bit later on. So let me go ahead and turn on back my drainage areas, my plan, and also the final terrain, and also the 3D portion of my drainage file. So I have my land use areas defined for my particular area for my drainage network that I'm going to set up. Now what we're going to do is start placing our inlets or our manholes or our particular structures that we're going to place for our drainage network that we're setting up. And I'm going to place those using Civil AccuDraw. So let me go ahead and toggle that on, which is down here, and I'm going to use the station and offset option. Then I will go up to my layout ribbon, and let's go to the place node option. Inside of here, you got some different options depending on how you want to place that particular node. For our situation here, what I like to do is fill out this dialog box as much as possible. That way, whenever I'm following my heads up prompt on the end of my cursor, I can just go through there and simply left click through those. So on this one here, we will base it off of the alignment. So for my rotation, I'm not going to use absolute. I'm actually going to go relative to the alignment, and we'll locate it here in a little bit, so we'll skip over that portion of it. And we will uncheck the one that says rotate because it will be different depending on which side of the road that we're on. We're not going to have a vertical offset on any of ours, so I will check mark that box right here. Elevation, I'm going to leave it unchecked because we're going to use our terrain model to determine where we're going to place those inlets. Feature definition, let's go ahead and change it. Let's go to the stormwater node, and we'll go to inlets. And for this one here, we're going to use this one right here that says type A through D, CV, which stands for curve vein, 2x2. So our first inlet we're going to place is going to be in this area right in here. But if you look on the end of your cursor, it's going to say, for our first option, to select the reference element for the placement of the elevation for that node. So we will go ahead and use that terrain model because it is our final terrain model. So let's go ahead and select it. And right now you'll see as I move my mouse around, my station and offset is doing nothing. My elevation is going up and down because I'm using that terrain model, but our station and offset is not doing anything because we haven't defined an element that we can base our stationing offset off of. So what I will need to do is hit my tab key, get to the focus to be on the offset, hit the letter O, and then now it's going to say select a reference element or reset to return to the command. Well, this is where you would come in here and select that alignment to be based off of. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here and select that reference element, which is going to be this right here. And now as I move my mouse left and right, up and down, you're going to see the stationing start to change. So on this one here, we're going to place it right before this curve right here on this curb and gutter. So on my stationing here, my station is going to be 2 plus 17. So I'll go ahead and type in 217, or I could type in 2 plus 17. I'll hit my tab key to go down to the next field, and my offset is going to be 35.5. Now before I type that in, I would put it on the side of the road that I'm wanting to go off of, because that will determine which side of the road that's going to go on, whether it's on the left side or the right side. On this one here, I'm going to go over to this side. So I got it on that side, and I'll type in 35.5. Tab to lock it in. You'll see it's at that spot right there. So if that's where I want to place it, of course, just go ahead and left click to accept it. Now it's going to ask you for the rotation of it. And of course, we want it relative to the alignment. So we will left click on that to accept that particular option. We still need to come in here and select that alignment again. And you could base it off of either the center line, which that's what we're going to do for our example. But you could also base it off of the edge of the curb, or this line right here. You can base it off of any line depending on the situation that you got. And where that would come into effect is, let's say you have your center line, but then all of a sudden through here you're going through a taper area and you have an inlet on one of those. Well, instead of using the alignment, you may have to use that tapered area through here to base it off of. So that's where you'd use maybe your edge of pavement or your curb line to determine that rotation of it. For our example here, we're just going to use our center line. And now you determine what the rotation needs to be for that. And for our rotation on this one here, you could either type in north or in 90 west, and I will tab to lock it in. Or you could also put in the rotation of 180 in that rotation field. Either one is fine. So once you have those set, go ahead and left click to accept it. And now you'll have that inlet placed. So basically this water right through here is coming down the road, and then it's going to flow into that inlet. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to come in here and place an inlet right here, another inlet right here, another inlet right here, another one right here, along with a couple manholes, which would be right here and right here, and then our outfall is just going to go to somewhere in this area right in here. So let me go ahead and place those inlets accordingly. Station on this one here will be 2 plus 15. Offset of 24.5. Accept it. Accept that rotation mode. Select the center line. Rotation on this one here will be 0. Accept it. For my next one, it's going to be station 3 plus 25 with an offset of 19. Accept it. Accept that rotation mode. Use my center line, and my rotation on this one here be 180. Accept it. I have one on the other side of the road. Same station. 3 plus 25. Offset's 19. Accept it. Accept that mode for the relative to alignment. I will select the center line, and then my rotation will be 0 on this one. And then I have one more, which is right in here. So on this one here, the station is 4 plus 64. Offset is still 19. Accept that. Accept that. Select the center line, and then my rotation will be north 90 west. And accept that. And then I have a couple manholes right in here, which all this water is going to hit those manholes and then flow out to a certain spot right over here. So let me go ahead and change my feature definition, change my groups here to the manholes, and the manhole that I'm going to use for our example is going to be the precast 4 dash flat. And on this side here, my station is going to be 2 plus 85 with an offset of 20. Accept it. Relative to the alignment, and then I will just go ahead and accept it here. I don't think it's really going to matter for a manhole because it's a circular manhole, so I don't think rotation is really going to matter too much for that. And then I will do the same thing to this other side right here. Station is going to be 2 plus 83 with an offset of 20. Accept it. Accept that. Select the alignment. I'll just left click to accept the rotation of it. And if for some reason the rotation is not correct, you can always go back in there after the fact and change that rotation. And then the last thing that we're going to have is our outfall. And for our outfall on this one here, we're just going to use a generic outfall. If you did have a flared in section where the water is coming out to you, you could change it to that, or a certain type of head wall. We're just dumping it out there to a certain spot. So I'll come in here to my generic nodes, and on this one here, we'll just use the one that says generic outfall. Now you're going to see on this one here, we're going outside of the terrain. So what would probably be beneficial here is to simply right click on that, and then come in here back to your tool, and it's going to say select a reference element for the node, for the elevation of it. Well, I'm going to come in here and check mark the box that says elevation, because I'm going to actually put in the elevation of where that water is going out to. So I'll come in here, select that, type in 910. In the first prompt, you're going to see that you can select the reference element for the node. Well, I'm going to right click because I'm going to determine what my elevation is. And I've already input that value right here. Of course, you can put in your station and offset, and I will put in my station. Let me go ahead and tab to the station field. It is station 3 plus 00 with an offset of 80. And then once I have that, I'll left click to accept it. I'll accept the rotation mode, and I'll be relative to the alignment again, and left click to go ahead and accept that. And then I will right click to end the tool. Close that down. Let me go ahead and hit F4 to clear that out. So now I have all my inlets placed for this particular network that I have going on. So I have my inlets, my manholes, and then of course the water is going to come to this spot right here. Now you're going to notice for like our inlets, in our manholes, we got a lot of stuff going on here, because what it's representing right now is not only the 2D portion of it, the 2D cell, it's also representing the 3D cell of it. So that's why you're seeing a lot of other line work that's going through there. Well, I always like to come in here and turn off the reference file for the 3D portion of it, just to make things look a lot clearer and a lot cleaner in the file in my view 1 default view here. So let me go back to the references, and you'll see that we have our 3D model turned on. Let me go ahead and turn off that in my view 1. Now you will just see the 2D cell there and not the 3D portion of it. And we'll come back to showing the 3D portion of it here in a little bit once we get our pipes put in. So let's go ahead and place the conduits in between each one of those inlets, manholes, and also the outfall of where the water is going to. Now what I'm going to do, just to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to go back to my references and simply turn off my plan and also my terrain and my drainage areas, just to kind of clear up a few things with it. That way I can easily come in here and put in those pipes going between each one of those particular nodes. So I will go up here and go to my place conduit tool. Of course, you have some options depending on how you want to place those conduits inside of here. We're going to come in here and change our feature definition. Let's go to stormwater, drainage, pipes. And for this one here, it's going to be a concrete pipe. So I will select the one that says circular concrete. Then from there, you have to give it the description, basically what size of pipe that you're putting in between each one of those. Well, for our example here, it's going to be 12-inch. So go ahead and change it to that. Now you just simply come in here and connect it, depending on which ones that you want to connect it to. But also, whenever you place it, you want to place it in the direction of flow. So like this one right here, we're going to go from this inlet down to here, and the water is going to be going from this inlet to this manhole, to this manhole, to the outfall. Same thing for this situation here. We got this water is going to come from this inlet, go down to this manhole, to the inlet. So you want to place them in the direction of flow that you think the water is going to be going. So if I go up to this box right here, this 2x2 box, you're going to see that I have 4 connection points that I can tie the pipe into. So for this example here, we're going to tie it to this spot right here. And let's go down to the manhole, and we're going to tie it to this manhole right here. Now you can either come over to the side here of this inner wall, or what I would do is come basically to the center of it, which will be right here, and it will actually truncate that back to this inner wall right here. And just to show you that, let me get to the center of it. I'll left click to accept it, and you'll see that it will automatically truncate back to that inner wall. And that's the way I would do it, because whenever you do it that way, if you ever decide to move this particular manhole, it'll actually move this pipe accordingly and still be tied to the center of it. If you tied it to this wall right here, that's fine, but then you'd have to go back in there and manually adjust that. So that was our first one. Let me go ahead and do it to the rest of these. So I will go back to the place conduit. All this is set. So I will go from here to there. I'll go from the center of this one to the center of this one. You'll see it truncated back to those. Go there. To there. Got that one placed. Let me go and place these other 2 right here. Once I have those done, just go ahead and right click in the tool. Now you'll see the pipes placed in between each one of those. And now if you want to see the actual 3D representation of it, what you can do is come over to your keyboard and hit the F6 key. And this will give you the 3D representation of it. Now we're not really seeing too much right now. Let me go ahead and make view number 2 active. If I try to rotate it, you really don't see anything going through it because, of course, all of our drainage stuff is underneath our terrain model. Well, if I come in here, making sure view number 2 is active, and if I go to my references, if I come in here and turn off maybe the plan and also the final terrain and the land use areas, now you will come through here and you'll start to see your drainage network that you've established. This will give you a good representation of what's going on for your particular drainage network. Now what some people will do, and this is just a tip here, they'll leave their terrain turned on, which still allows them to see a few things, but if they want to see the drainage structures through that terrain model, what you can do is come in here, go back to the references, and over our columns here, I'm going to right click over it and turn on the transparency. And then I will apply a transparency to that terrain model. So I applied a 90% transparency to it. So now, once I come up to my view attributes, and it's probably turned off, which it is, if I turn on my transparency, now you can actually see the terrain model, but you can see the actual drainage structures underneath there. So if I come through here and I rotate it, it maybe give you a little bit better representation of what's going on for your network, and you can kind of see it going over that terrain model. So that's just a little tip to remember as you're starting to lay out stuff and maybe getting everything set up the way you want it. Let me go ahead and close down view number 2 because we can always go back to that by hitting the F6 key. Next thing that we will do is come through here and set up our drainage areas that are going into each one of those inlets. Let's go back to my references here, and I will turn on the terrain. We can go ahead and turn back on the plan if you wish to have that on. But another one that we will turn on is this one that says drainage areas. And basically what I did here, just for time purposes, is I went through here and created those drainage areas that are coming into those inlets. That way I can simply come through there and select it, and it'll create that drainage area accordingly through the drainage tools. So that's just something that you would have to determine whenever you're placing those drainage areas. So to do that, let's go to the place catchment, and you have a couple of different options here. You got pick shape, pick points, or flood fill. You just pick whichever method that you want to utilize depending on your particular situation. So we will use the pick shape since I already have those defined. And then we will come into our feature definition. And in our feature definition, if you expand this out, you're actually just going to have two different options. You have one that says land use defined area, which allows you to use the land use areas if you have those in your file, which we do for our example, to compute that C value for that particular drainage area. Or you can do a user defined, which a user defined, you place that drainage area out there or catchment area, and then you'd come in there after the fact and put in that composite C value of what you think that area is. So there's basically two different ways you can do it. Our example here, we're going to use the land use defined area. Then after that, you basically just follow the prompts. First thing it says is select your layout method, which we're going to use the pick shape, so we will select it. Pick your shape is going to be this shape right here. And then now it's going to say pick your outflow. Where is the water going to? The water is coming into this particular inlet, so we will go ahead and select it. And then it's going to say select reference surface. Do you want a reference surface for it, which will create a surface of it on the 3D portion of it, or you can hit the Alt key without creating that surface. Normally what I do is just hit the Alt key, and I'm not worried about that 3D surface. So now you'll see that it created that drainage area. So I will go ahead and do the same thing to these other ones right here. I will pick my method of pick shape. I will select the shape. which would be this shape right here. My outflow, which is this inlet right here, and I will hit the Alt key to not create that 3D shape. And you'll see that it creates that shape right there. Pick shape. I will select the shape, select the outflow, and hit the Alt key again. Do the same thing to these other two right here. And then once I have those catchment areas or drainage areas, whatever you want to call it, once I have those created, then I can go ahead and hit F4 to clear that out. Now you will see that we do have some drainage areas for these little sections right here through our intersection, but that water is not being collected anywhere because it's actually going around that curb and gutter and going to some other spot. As you can tell, whenever we go back to my terrain model and I go to the properties of it and I turn on my flow arrows again, you can see this water is going this direction, hits this curb, and goes right through here. But this water right through here, of course, it's being collected and going around the curb and then possibly going down this curb and gutter to a different spot. So that would just be something that you would have to determine as an engineer or designer on the project, that maybe this existing structure right here, maybe it's collecting that water and we're fine, or maybe you have to do something else to accommodate for that particular situation. Let me go ahead and turn off the flow arrows again. Go to the properties of it, and I will turn off my flow arrows. And then of course I can come back to my references for my drainage areas that I had selected, and I can either turn that off, or if you don't need it anymore, you could detach it. So these two right here, I theoretically could just come in here and detach those because I don't need those anymore. Now another option that you have whenever you're creating those drainage areas or your catchment areas is, number one, of course, if you drew in your catchment areas, we could do it just the way we did it right there. Another way that you can try to do it too, you can come into your tools ribbon and go to this option right here that says catchments. And in the catchments, you can come in here and do this delineate catchments. Now we're not going to do it for our example here, but you can come in here and select your inlet, come down through here and select whichever one that you want to utilize, whether it's the land use area or the user defined. And basically what this will do is look at your terrain model and come in here and place that catchment area dynamically. That's just an option that you can do, and you can try if you wish to do that. The only drawback with that particular tool, just as a note, is you can't come in here and modify that area because it's actually looking at the terrain model. So if your terrain model's maybe not exactly 100% correct, if you try to come in here and try to modify that area, it won't allow you to do it. Versus the way we did it, you'll have these handles right here. So if something is incorrect, you can always come in here and modify that handle to adjust that drainage area. But like I said, if you use the catchment delineation option, you will not have the ability to do that. So it's kind of a give and take on that particular portion of it if you want to utilize that or not. Let me go ahead and undo to set that back. So for our part one video, we are finished. We got everything set up where we have our catchment areas, we have our inlets placed, we have our conduits placed, and so forth. In the next video, we will go through there and talk about computing the network, looking at the flex tables along with the profile runs to see how your water is flowing through your particular network.